So today I'd like to say a few words about the research I'm conducting and explain what is hidden under the title Homophobic Discourse in the Press Coverage of Three Infamous Sodomy Trials between 1835 and 1954. And a trigger warning, as the title suggests, the video does mention severe cases of homophobia and homophobic behaviour. So let's start with research aims and objectives. The study I will be talking about is a qualitative study in the field of historical linguistics, and it aims to offer an insight into the trajectory of changes in the homophobic narrative in the United Kingdom. In other words, I wish to see how, if at all, people's understanding of homosexuality changed over the years. And to that end, I will analyse conceptual metaphors in the press coverage of three significant scandals that took place in 1835, 1895 and 1954. And although the focus of this research is historical, I think it's important to acknowledge that homophobia remains a pressing issue in our current discourse. So not only does research on such narratives amplify the voices of those discussed and the countless of others whose stories remain untold but were very much alike, it also allows us to discern historical patterns, empowering us to rectify and accept the behaviours in our contemporary society. Allow me to introduce you briefly to the scandals in question. The first scandal took place in 1835, the very end of the Georgian era, when James Pratt and John Smith were accused of participating in a sexual intercourse in a rented room. They were accused by the owners of the inn, who allegedly saw them through a keyhole. They were the last two in England to be sentenced to death under Section 15 of the Offences Against the Person Act, and present investigations confirm with near certainty that the accusations were likely false, and the cited anatomical descriptions of intimacy would have been impossible to witness. A second scandal concerns a renowned artist, Oscar Wilde, whose homosexuality was an open secret, existing in the Victorian morality realm, and its transfer to the social and public discourse broke the conspiracy of silence surrounding such immoral topics. Wilde was married and he had two sons, but in 1891 he began an affair with Lord Alfred Douglas. His father was absolutely outraged by the relationship and sought to expose Wilde. So, in the London club, he left a card that read, "For Oscar Wilde, posing sodomite." And although friends urged Wilde to flee to France, he decided to sue for defamation. Unfortunately, the trials were poorly for Oscar Wilde, and after 3 days, his lawyer withdrew the lawsuit. Authorities, however, saw this as a sign of guilt and arrested him, and he was sentenced to 2 years of hard labour, which was the hardest possible sentence, under Section 11 of the Criminal Law Amendment Act. The last scandal concerns Peter Whiteley. He was one of the first men in the United Kingdom to publicly declare his homosexuality. He was charged along with four other people after spending a vacation together at the beach house for conspiracy to incite certain male persons to commit serious offences with male persons. He was sentenced to 18 months, what absolutely outraged many members of the public who had begun to regard the witch hunt atmosphere of the 1950s with distaste. And the outcry contributed to the government's decision to set up a committee to tackle the issue of homosexuality, which eventually paved the way for the partial decriminalisation of homosexuality a decade later. And these three pivotal homophobic scandals occurred across the three distinct eras in the history of the United Kingdom, at intervals of nearly 60 years, and they offer valuable insight into the evolving public narratives surrounding homosexuality. I mentioned at the beginning that to see the progress in the homophobic narrative, I'd study conceptual metaphors. So what are they, and why did I decide to focus on them? Conceptual metaphors are said to be functional. They aim to streamline the understanding of abstract concepts like, for example, emotions or life and death. And to do so, people understand them through the prism of less abstract concepts like, for example, food or human body. That is the base for example, ideas of food, conceptual metaphor, that can be expressed using a linguistic metaphor that's food for thought, or there are too many facts here for me to digest them all. In 2004, Charteris-Black proposed critical metaphor analysis, a meaningful enrichment concerned with integrating critical discourse analysis with conceptual metaphor theory, corpus linguistics, pragmatics, and cognitive linguistics. It argued that analyzing conceptual metaphors within their context can help to explore implicit speaker intentions, power relations, and ideologies, which applies to the study of homophobia as a social issue. So, a little bit about the initial findings. Preliminary investigation of press coverage of the first scandal points out to a significant correlation between the conceptualization of homosexuality and religion, which resulted in expressions like, "Upon sincere repentance, sins were forgiven, for in this country mercy could not be expected to persons like them." The initial examination of the press coverage of Wilde's case suggests a transition in this pattern. It came to be understood as a destructive force affecting both the individual involved and the whole society, as seen in "homosexuality is poison," "homosexuality is decay," and "homosexuality is down" conceptual metaphors. Finally, the press narrative of the white blood scandal appears to coincide with a trend going from demonization towards medical pathologization of homosexuality, which started in the late 19th century and continued well into the 1970s. So words like abnormal, cure, disease, or invert point out to this change in the narrative. Although the research is yet to be finalized, the foregoing data suggests a clear pattern in mainly negative conceptualizations of homosexuality between 1835 and 1954, portraying homosexuals as the wrongdoers and the rest of the society as their victims, with both differences and similarities in the way of conceptualizing it.